What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, August 3rd, 2017. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, keeping us out of trouble and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And we're going to start off here with a little bit of sad news. Jim Mars passed away apparently yesterday. And people who've been following the independent media and the internet and the truth movement know that name very well. He's authored many books such as Crossfire, which was actually one of the sources that director Oliver Stone used in his film on the JFK assassination. So it is a bit of a loss here. Getting on over to the infighting in the White House. Apparently, a top Trump administration intelligence official, Ezra Cohen-Watnick, has been fired. And what seems to be going on is that new White House Chief of Staff Kelly is trying to get rid of everybody who was either a holdover from Obama or hired by Michael Flynn. And so the pink slips are going on out over there. And apparently McMaster's is now on the out. We're seeing this story here at the Gateway Pundit that McMaster's is going to be sent to Afghanistan to sort of oversee that meltdown after he was caught leaking to the FBI's McCabe. So it's looking to me like Trump is starting to figure out how D.C. politics really works, and it could not happen too soon. Another article coming on out from the Miami New Times on the unanswered questions about Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the Iwan brothers' IT scandal. And apparently they're out there still digging at the information. Apparently the FBI is able to recover information from those smashed hard drives. They've already recovered Hillary Clinton emails related to work, related to Benghazi, that were not turned over when requested by congressional investigators. So that's still out there. Now, apparently the claim that there's a Wasserman married to one of the people in the staff of the lawyer who is tasked with investigating all this, or covering it up as the case may be, is Wasserman's sister, and it turns out that's not entirely accurate. It's a distant relative, but it's not her sister. But still in all, blood is thicker than water, and it is amazing how many families that we have vying for power in Washington, D.C. It's almost starting to look like Game of Thrones over there. Alrighty, getting on here. Interesting little video that we posted to whatreallyhappened.com, and there's CNN, and CNN is interviewing John Podesta, going on and on about Russia, which is now back on the corporate media for reasons I'll make clear to you in a couple of minutes here. And it's interesting because they played an excerpt of Sarah Huckabee basically chastising the White House press corps over their Russia obsession. Says if you want to talk to, about somebody who had a corrupt connection with Russia, you got to talk about the Clintons. Bill Clinton got that $500,000 for a speech over there in Russia. He met Putin, shook his hand. You've got Hillary Clinton, the Uranium One deal. Hillary Clinton helping this American company bypass Russian sanctions and buy a Russian company, and all the money that was pouring into the Clinton Foundation. And Podesta dodges the question by saying, oh, well, the mainstream media has already dismissed all of that. Like, that's the final word, because the mainstream media says it's not worth paying attention to. That's his only argument. And then he goes back on the attack against Donald Trump, Russia. Now, to give you an idea of where we are in terms of the decline of our society, it turns out half of Detroit's 8 candidates for mayor that are going to be on the primary ballot next week are convicted felons for crimes involving drugs, assault, weapons. 2 were charged for assault with intent to commit murder. How do they wind up on a ballot? Now, Judicial Watch has released emails proving Huma Abedin is guilty of sending classified information in a non-secure manner. She should be going to jail for violating Title 18. But we can't touch them. Don't you all know DNC actually stands for Do Not Convict? And they're still after Trump, and the latest news here is that Special Counsel Mueller has now convened a grand jury in the Russia probe. He's trying to make it look like we're not bringing the indictments. These came from a grand jury. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining our network. Apparently, a newly declassified CIA report unearthed by the Freedom of Information Act investigative cooperative Muck Rock contains an interesting commentary. This goes back to 1984 and has a series of internal memos as part of the CIA's recent CREST release, which stands for CIA Record Search Tool. And basically the CIA viewed the media as the principal villains. Now remember, at the end of World War II, the CIA started trying to take control of the corporate media through Operation Mockingbird. But by 1984, they still didn't have a total lock on it. And these memos are all about, we got to finish this up here. And in addition, apparently the CIA has also been doing the same thing at universities and journalism schools to control the curriculum, to control the research. It's a spookocracy. Story over at Infowars.com. YouTube is going to start hiding controversial content. How do they decide what's controversial? Well, there's a little button for people to flag it saying, I don't like this, I'm offended. And YouTube will hide the videos or demonetize them if they are flagged. And you can always find somebody who's going to be offended by something. I mean, if you go and look at the videos we've done about Claire's music, the videos on that, some of, yes, they're topical, and we get hate email about how can you even question the necessity for war? What's wrong with you? You're a coward. No, I'm not, and the last 24 years prove it. It takes a lot of courage to stand up and tell the government you're wrong, or tell the corporate media you're lying. So let's turn over here to the war zones. There is so much going on. It is, I think we really are already in World War III. We're just waiting for the big bang that the historians will say, oh yes, it's official. Apparently, Syrian government forces have entered the strategic Sukna town in Homs province, and apparently a majority of the ISIS fighters left last week. There are a few who stayed behind to be suicide bombers and snipers. So it's going to be rough going here. Now, Rex Tillerson is out there basically saying that if Russia expects the cooperation of the United States in Syria, the first requirement is that all Iranian forces must leave immediately. The presence of these Iranian military forces, they must leave and go home. This is all pretty strong words for a nation that is in Syria without the permission of the Syrian government. Russia was invited in. Iran has the permission of the Syrian government to be there. The United States does not. And Rex Tillerson gets on up there and says, you people must run this war the way we think. And like I said the other day, I think the rest of the world has had just about enough of the United States throwing its weight around. More and more, it's looking like a paper tiger anyway. In terms of Iran, apparently the war plan is on. They're just looking for a way to make it look like it's Iran's fault, that Iran deserved it, that we have no choice but to attack Iran. And the timetable is October, and Trump is going to claim that Tehran is cheating on the nuclear deal. Now remember, the IAEA is in Iran. They're watching all of the facilities associated with their nuclear power program, and the IAEA keeps coming back and saying Iran is fully in compliance. So if Trump comes on out and says Iran is cheating, it's going to have all the legitimacy of claiming Saddam had nuclear weapons. But apparently Trump is looking for some way that he can end the P5+1 deal and make it look like it's Iran's fault. Now, the other day we were talking about how there's actually talk coming out of the White House of maybe pulling out of Afghanistan. We've been there 16 years, and it's not going well. In fact, according to a story that came out of NBC, no less, Trump says the United States is losing the Afghan war. And apparently Trump is becoming very frustrated with his advisors tasked with crafting a new U.S. strategy in Afghanistan. He's even talking about firing the war's top military commander. But they don't call Afghanistan the graveyard of empires for no reason. Many empires have gone in there and been destroyed. Huge setback for Great Britain. Beginning of the end for the Soviet Union. And the Russians have got to be laughing their heads off right now because the U.S. walked into the same problem. Now, of course, you know that the CIA is going to want that war in Afghanistan to continue, and they'll do anything to keep it going. Because right now, the CIA is trafficking in that Afghan opium, and until they can conquer North Korea, they don't really have another reliable source. The interesting thing, of course, is getting this past Donald Trump, because I don't think he knows that the biggest drug smuggler in the country is the country. And I can't imagine that he would be very comfortable with that. Now, of course, they're going to argue about the oil pipeline right-of-way, which was the proximate cause of the invasion of Afghanistan. And Trump might come back and say it would be cheaper for the oil companies to pay the additional pipeline right-of-way than the taxpayers are spending occupying Afghanistan for the last 16 years. And he'd be absolutely right. We'd save a lot of money pulling out of Afghanistan and letting the oil companies pay fair market rate for that pipeline right-of-way. But from the oil company's point of view, that's a bad deal. They don't want to pay more for that pipeline right-of-way, and they're not having to pay the cost of the Afghan occupation. You are. Now, things are heating up around Qatar, and apparently, they're a huge buyer of military hardware. They used to buy most of it from the United States, but they're getting ready to add 7 new warships to their fleet, and the United States is not getting that contract. It's another indicator of a world that is turning away from the United States here. Now, as you know, China just opened up their first foreign military base in Djibouti, over there in Africa. And, of course, everybody's upset. Oh, China's being aggressive. They're being provocative. Well, how many foreign bases does the United States have? 800? China has 1. Russia has, I think, maybe 2. And they're the aggressors, they're the danger, they're the threat to world peace. Apparently there was a little bit of a kerfuffle because apparently China's warships docked at Djibouti detected Japanese divers coming over to examine the ship close up. In other words, espionage. And the divers apparently... the water was too clear, or for whatever reason they were detected, and basically China is now telling all of their warships, you're going to have to take some security precautions. Because everybody's going to want to see what goodies China has inside those warships here. Now, I've been saying for a very... actually, we have a caller on the line. Keith in Montana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I got one question for you, Mike. Doesn't Syria and Iran have a mutual defense treaty?
Yes, they do. And now Iran and Russia have one.
Right. And then I think it was they call it French 25 or French 23, a paper, something like that. Anyway, about 2 weeks ago, they were hyping that Israel was mad because Syria had allowed Iran to install a military base.
Yes.
And so I think this is a push from the Israelis bending Trump's arm and stuff like that, you know.
I have no doubt whatsoever that Israel certainly is weighed in on the discussion. And they're concerned about Iran starting to project power past their borders. And they want Iran contained.
Right, that would involve Hezbollah.
Yeah, well, that's over in Lebanon.
Hezbollah, yeah. Yeah, well, I know, but it's the whole area there, yeah.
Well,
but, remember when they called that ceasefire that, I forget his name, was it Lieberman that said that the ceasefire didn't apply to Israel?
Yes. Because Israel wants that Golan. I mean, they're already out there trying to campaign for the world. The world must recognize the Golan is really part of Israel, along with all that oil and gas.
You know, remember when Google changed their maps?
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. I remember that one.
All right, well, hey, nice talking to you, Mike. Best you and Claire, okay?
All right, certainly we're going to let you go here. Now, every time I talk about my desire to avoid this next world war, I have the observation that we're going to lose this one. After 16 years of war across the globe, our stockpiles are drawn down, our weapons are worn out, the new weapons being built by the defense contractors are overpriced junk. And my conclusion is we cannot prevail in a conventional war against Russia and or China. And I'm not the only person who thinks so. Over at Politico magazine, they're quoting retired U.S. Army Colonel Douglas McGregor as saying the Russians will annihilate the U.S. Army on the battlefield. It doesn't matter how much money is being spent on our military when it is being spent wastefully and poorly. And he's absolutely right. Russia is getting ready to unveil their latest generation ICBM. It's called the Sarmat. And it's lighter, but it's considered deadlier, even though it's actually going to carry fewer warheads than the current frontline ICBM. It's going to carry a lot more decoys. And remember, Russia's latest generation of reentry vehicles are maneuverable, which makes any U.S. ballistic missile defense system obsolete. THAAD will not be able to hit this. Patriot certainly not be able to hit it. And apparently Russia is putting these into hardened shelters that are able to absorb multiple hits by nuclear weapons. This is getting really serious, people. This is getting really, really serious. Now, Russia loves a parade on land and sometimes on water, and they had their Navy Day parade. Putin was there doing a lot of talking and showing off the latest and greatest of Russia's naval forces, and they included the Dmitry Donskoy, the world's largest submarine, and it's not new. It is the last operational Typhoon, and they are huge. It is amazing. I mean, this thing even has a swimming pool inside for the crew to use. They really are gigantic. And so they're showing that one off. But the Typhoons are out there. Russia's already come up with a newer generation ballistic missile submarine. But it's the last remaining Typhoon. I remember when I was working down in Australia in the 1980s, I got to tour a Soviet-era Foxtrot. That was kind of fun. I felt like Tom Clancy out there. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the various wars all over the world. And I'm looking at this article that came out of Air Force Times, which is in a position to know, saying that U.S. military operations in Iraq are far more extensive than you are being told. They don't want you paying attention to all this fighting and bloodshed all over the world. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hey, you were talking about the typhoon?
Yes.
I want everybody to know that had 2 nuclear reactors, and if one got knocked out, the other one can still run. Everybody would have to go to the other side of the stub. It was built in like 2 tubes put together.
Yeah,
really amazing design.
It was a very good design here, and Russia. A lot of Russia's submarines had dual reactors because they weren't able to get them to the reliability of the U.S. Navy, so they double up on them. They had a disastrous experiment with liquid sodium reactors, but then so did the United States. But most of America's nuclear surface ships, the aircraft carriers, they've got multiple reactors as well.
Remember, Russia's also got the world's only nuclear battleship, battle cruiser.
That's true.
Peter the Great.
Yes, that's true. It's amazing for all the nuclear technology that's out there that the U.S. government is still relying primarily on fossil fuel-driven warships, which don't have the range of the nuclear vessels, and it seems like this is another pander to the oil companies at the expense of military effectiveness.
Hey, Mike, on the Typhoon call, you know that has 20 missile bays. Each one can hold 10 MIRV warheads. So if you figure 8 live and 2 dummies, that one sub can pretty much knock your country out in the long run because the power grid would be knocked out, and all the major, all the big cities like New York, Los Angeles, Washington would be knocked out. So one sub can do a lot of damage. People don't realize that.
Well, the same is true for the U.S. Ohio class. 24 tubes. Each Trident missile carries 8 warheads. It's limited by treaty. 8 warheads and 4 decoys. Yeah, I mean people don't really understand. If this thing got out of control, we're talking a real life on the beach. And when you consider that radioactivity from Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and the Nevada and Pacific tests can still be detected in the atmosphere, you realize this. It's a line we cannot cross. And I'm very alarmed that Paul Craig Roberts is out there saying that there's actually serious talk in Washington, D.C. of just taking out North Korea with nukes, which Douglas MacArthur wanted to do that. So one of the reasons Truman fired him. And just go ahead and do a decap on Russia with nuclear weapons. And when you remember that the United States is the only country that has ever actually used nuclear weapons against the civilians of another country, you start wondering what is going on over there.
Hey, we're bringing democracy to them, nuclear style, huh? What a joke, right? Like Vietnam, they wanted to, when does these people are crazy. They don't have they live in a bubble, of their fantasy world, and they just don't get it. They're like, they messed up so many people's lives in the world, Mike. They don't give a crap.
They really have, and you're absolutely right. They literally see themselves as a breed apart from ordinary people. That they're special, they're elite, they'll never personally have to be inconvenienced by the war. That's what all the ordinary people's children are for.
And you know that by looking at Washington, D.C., it's like a fortress of steel. It's like a castle, a castle away from its citizens. That's basically what it's the same as the old kings and queens. It's the same concept.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a very frightening prospect. And certainly, again, I talked to a lot of people here on Hawaii, and they're very concerned. If there is a nuclear war with Russia or China, this island will probably get hit. And that's causing a great deal of stress for Claire and I because, we look out that window, there's Pearl Harbor. And that's the communication hub for all the Pacific. Anyway, Dustin, we're going to let you go here. We've got to take another break for commercials. And we'll be right back with more about the war and wars, emphasis on the plural. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take a phone call here from George in Texas. George, aloha. What's on your mind today?
How you doing, Mike? I don't know if the rest of your audience found out, but the investigative journalist, I think JFK expert Jim Mars passed away yesterday.
And we announced it right at the top of the show.
Oh, well, I probably missed the top of the show, but the thing is, I feel inspired. Not because he died, but the thing is that he was a true investigative journalist, not the journalist that we have today.
Well,
he was the last of a breed.
When I was teaching computer animation over at the University of Hawaii, the classroom right next to me was beginning journalism. They were just teaching those people how to do their own hair and makeup. That was it. And boy, what a far cry from when I took journalism when I was in college, where we actually went on out and dug up stories. But, today journalism is reading whatever that computer tells you to say to the people.
Like I say, he was the last of a breed.
Yeah, well, I think there's a few of us still kicking around, but, he was an icon. There's no question about that.
Even though there's some of the topics that he touched on that he stuck his neck out, I don't agree with or I don't quite understand, but, when it came to, the Fourth Reich and JFK and depopulation and eugenics, he was spot on.
Yes.
Even though he probably got into UFOs and paranormal, which is coast to coast up, he stuck his neck out for. But a lot of the topics that he touched on, he woke up a lot of people, and I hope, his legacy passes on. And I wish his family, I hope my condolences to his family. Thank you, Mike.
All right, well, you're welcome. The reality is nobody's going to be bang spot on all the topics they cover. And that's why it is so important for you to look at what is presented and make up your own mind. There are some people out there in the truth movement, good-intentioned, who are very knowledgeable on certain subjects, and on other subjects they've gotten suckered in, by the various hoaxes that are being put on out there, trying to keep the truth movement confused and disrupted and at odds with each other. So again, you're all intelligent people. You need to learn how to be your own best analyst and decide for yourself, is what is being presented making sense or not. All right, back to the phones. Terry in Oregon, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Terry, I guess he just...
Washington. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you now. We had some kind of a glitch there. What's on your mind today?
Okay, William Crystal, Neocon in Washington, he said, he wrote an article, what good are nuclear weapons if you can't use them? And then boy. I think he wrote something else about surviving a nuclear war. And the other day we were talking, and you said after 4 months, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were... the environment was good enough to go in there and start rebuilding.
No, I don't think I said 4 months. It took a lot of years, but Japan just shoves people back into these things. They're already sending people back to live near the Fukushima Daiichi reactor. But yeah, these people are all going to have cancers and so forth and so on. I think I mentioned that some of the isotopes created in a fission explosion have very short half-lives, like the iodine. But there are other isotopes that just last forever and ever. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, and these weapons they dropped in Japan, they're like pea shooter weapons compared to what they have now. Aren't these ones they have now like 15,000 times or maybe 1,500 times as powerful?
Well,
they are.
The tactical warheads, like the W-34, the warheads on the Trident missile are actually about 5 times the force of Hiroshima because they're considered tactical nuclear weapons rather than strategic. Both the Soviet Union and the United States went through a phase of creating strategic nuclear weapons that were just these monstrous, city killers. 3-5 megaton, the biggest one ever built, was the Tsar bomb by the Soviet Union, which could yield 100 megatons, and when they tested it, they dialed it back to 50, and it still left just this gigantic scar all across the land where they fired that thing off. So they've been moving away from the big strategic weapons that can wipe out an entire city in favor of smaller, more accurate tactical warheads that are lower in yield. And many of the warheads actually have a selectable yield, so you can dial up the explosive force to match the expected size of the target.
Yeah, well, my point's going to be here that, when they start throwing these back and forth and around, I don't know if these neocons are really realistically looking at what the effects are going to be. They think they're going to come out of their holes underground and look around and start rebuilding later, But, how would it compare? They might come out and find a nuclear winter, something that, is worse than what the dinosaurs faced when just one asteroid hit the Earth.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And a lot of people who've studied the ancillary effects of nuclear warfare have sounded that alarm, that you're going to see a lot of debris in the air, a nuclear winter. Because of all the radiation, there's going to be all kinds of mutations taking place that could lead to the rise of some very dangerous toxic life forms. And so the idea that you're going to come out of your bunker and you're going to find the same food plants that were there before may not be realistic. You may come on out and discover that all of a sudden gophers are now the size of elephants and are very angry about that. There's a lot of unpredictability there. But again, it's just something we cannot allow to happen because I think once it gets started, we're hearing about this doomsday system built by the Soviet Union and apparently still operational. If the U.S. nukes Russia, so the story goes, every nuclear device Russia has will launch. And I presume, probably, that the United States has something similar. Looks to me like they've basically reactivated Cheyenne Mountain. And by the way, Cheyenne Mountain was the reason Russia was building bombs in that 50 megaton range, to be able to get down there and destroy that command post.
Yeah, well, let me ask you about the Samson option. I understand Israel has that policy where if they get attacked, they're going to launch everything. And somebody said the other day, I don't know if there's any truth in it, that they had weapons in the United States hidden over here in this country that they could use for that. Do you know anything about that?
Well, it is suspected. Obviously, it's not proven, but the story goes, some years ago, there was a big scandal over an Israeli-owned company called Numex, which was a nuclear waste processing company, and there was a nuclear refining company, and there was a big problem in what is called a MUF, a material unaccounted for. And apparently the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was keeping an eye on this company, and they were accounting for all the nuclear material, and they came up short by enough weapons-grade uranium for 6 warheads. And it is thought that this is where Israel got the fissionable materials for their first generation of nuclear weapons. Now, Israel could very easily have kept enough fissionable weapons-grade uranium in the United States to build a single bomb. And once you've got that, building a bomb is easy. A uranium fission bomb, it's just a big pipe. And you've got 2 masses of uranium below the critical mass at each end. You slap them together, it goes boom. And when the Nuclear Emergency Search Team was making what they call the baseline maps of radioactivity, so that if they were searching for some kind of a nuclear device, it would stand out because they would know what all the known sources were. They discovered that the Israeli consulate in New York is a source of radiation. And, of course, Israel will not allow any kind of an inspection to see what's in there. So, yeah, it's entirely possible that Israel held back uranium and has created a device to just have on standby for whatever reason. And I got to tell you, I feel very sorry for those people working in that Israeli consulate because they're being exposed to radiation. They're going to get sick.
Yeah. Let me ask you, when the Soviet Union went down, I remember there was talk about nuclear weapons that weren't accounted for.
Yes.
Do you remember what the outcome was at? Did you ever find them? I know the FBI was going to get involved in all that sort of thing.
Well, my last understanding is that, yeah, some of those weapons went missing, And we don't know where they wound up, and that's a real danger. Now, you need to understand something about these weapons, okay? That fissionable material inside is decaying, and past a certain point, they're not going to work anymore because, in effect, the degree of enrichment is in constant decline. And if you'll remember, George W. Bush ordered all of our nuclear weapons to be updated, overhauled, and so forth, which meant basically re-refining the weapons-grade uranium back up to par and reloading those warheads. Those Soviet Union warheads, unless they have been in the possession of a nation-state with the resources to do it, they may have reached the point where they may not work anymore. Especially the plutonium bomb, because that explosive outer shell, that stuff deteriorates over time very quickly.
Yeah, and this morning you were talking about all these countries are just turning away from the United States because they're so ridiculous in what they want to do and so corrupt. The United States, I'm talking about, that we'll reach a point where we're on our own. And if that's the case, we might have, hopefully we'll have enough sense to tell Israel, we can't do this anymore. You're on your own. We're out of here.
Well, I think Israel is blackmailing the United States government over 9/11 and who knows what all else. And they're simply going to say, you will go on impoverishing your people to give us more weapons, or we'll tell the world who really did 9/11, and it'll be worse for you than for us because everybody expects Israel to do this kind of stuff. But not the U.S. government. And the fact of the matter is that Israel has used their money to put a lot of people in Congress, and those people in Congress are very beholden to Israel. Look at the very tight relationship between the McCain family and Israel. John McCain is always supported by Israeli interest in this country. McCain's father, Admiral McCain, was in charge of the cover-up of Israel's attack on the USS Liberty. So it's a family affair. It's kind of a hereditary thing.
Yeah, but it comes to a certain point where these, I hope the Congress would come to their senses and say, hey, it's our survival at stake now.
No, it's not going to happen.
Overrides any...
Congress has never had any sense. Congress is a life form with 800 legs and no brain.
Yeah, you're right, and totally corrupt. And usually the more corrupt the country is, the bigger they fall in the end.
Yes, that's absolutely true here, and I think that's what's going to happen, is we're just going to have to wait it out. We're going to have to be patient and let the whole thing implode the way the Soviet Union did. And as we start setting up the next country, we have a few ironclad rules, like no dual nationals are allowed in the government.
Right.
And, no private central banking, and a whole bunch of other common sense rules to protect this country and allow it to prosper peacefully.
Well, when you say we have to let it fall, you're talking about economically, but if we have to let it fall because of a nuclear war, that's totally different. There may not be any comeback.
Well, no, I agree with you on that one. I mean, I'm talking about the indications that we're seeing in front of us right now that the United States is heading toward a Soviet Union-style collapse. Not just the economy, the federal government itself. I mean, look at all this infighting we're seeing in the White House and in the Congress. I mean, the infighting has always been there. That's the nature of D.C. politics. But normally it is concealed from the American people. Now it's on full view. Everybody's watching it, not just in the United States, but around the world.
Right. Okay, Mike, it was a good conversation. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you next time.
All right, thanks an awful lot there. And again, going back and looking at the Soviet Union in the months leading up to its collapse, the same thing was happening. There were the reformers, like Gorbachev, and the hardliners. They were openly at war with each other for what the Soviet Union was supposed to be doing next, along with bankrupting the nation for this incredible weapons program they had. Now, getting on back to Iran, Nikki Haley is up there at the UN Security Council and saying that there has to be a declaration or a resolution in the wake of this Iranian rocket launch. And the Security Council's credibility is on the line unless they just come on out and slap Iran down. I mean, how dare Iran launch a satellite into orbit? How dare they dare? Only the United States is allowed to launch satellites into orbit. Not that we can. We still have to buy rocket engines from the evil Russians. And we need evil Russians to take our astronauts to the space station. But that's entirely beside the point. All space activity goes through the United States, just like all the world's economies must use the U.S. federal note. That's just the way it is. And the UN's job is to make the world bow down and obey us. That seems to be what Nikki Haley is out there saying. But again, Iran's leadership is out there saying they have every right to have a space launch capability, to put up their own communication satellites, their own weather satellites, their own surveillance satellites. They're cooperating fully with all the entities that try and keep everybody's satellites out of each other's way. And they do. They absolutely do. And Nikki Haley's trying to make a big deal that Iran launching a satellite violates the spirit of the P5+1. It doesn't even really make any sense if you think about it. But again, we're just seeing this incredible rush toward a war with Iran in October. That seems to be the timetable here. Now, Bibi Netanyahu is out there boasting on his record on the number of Israeli illegal settlements he has built in the occupied West Bank. All of these, of course, are crimes under international law and are not recognized by any other governments on earth, but that doesn't matter. Netanyahu, look at me, I did good things. I stole a whole bunch of Palestinian land, and I put up a whole bunch of Jews-only towns there, and you should be in love with me for that. And, of course, between that and the kerfuffle at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, what he's trying to do is distract everybody from the fact that the Israeli police have now formally communicated to the magistrate court that Netanyahu is suspected of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And after a brief respite, the corporate media is now back to all Russia all the time. And they're just going on and on about how there's a grand jury and the White House is saying that, as far as they know, there is no actual investigation going on into Donald Trump. And they're just ramping it on up. Now, a story just came across my desk here. One of the other reasons McMaster may be on his way to Afghanistan is apparently he allowed Susan Rice to keep her top secret clearance. She had unfettered access to all classified material. In the letter, McMaster's waives the requirement for need to know. And remember, last March, it came on out that a lot of Hillary and her people still had their security clearances, even though they were no longer at the State Department and were not entitled to have those clearances, that they'd been allowed to keep them. The excuse was that Hillary Clinton was researching a new book. Well, that story never made any sense, because anything they read in a classified document could not go into that book, obviously. And now that the book is out, people are looking at it and saying, it's just more Hillary tantrum. I should have won. I should have won. They took it away from me. It was my turn. It's amazing. All right. Getting on back to what's going on. Over there in Israel, polls are showing 69% of Americans oppose this Israel anti-boycott act being pushed by AIPAC. Overwhelmingly opposed by the American people. Congress could care less. They're overwhelmingly for whatever AIPAC wants this week, with one notable exception. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, apparently as she was doing her town hall meetings, was just excoriated by the crowd for supporting this, and she has now withdrawn her sponsorship of the Israel Anti-Boycott Act. And we will applaud her courage to do so, and we know that AIPAC will be gunning for her seat next election, because that's what they do to members of Congress who do not toe the line. just like they did to Cynthia McKinney. Now, during the 2 weeks of confrontation over the Al-Aqsa Mosque, press groups, media groups monitored a huge surge in Israeli attacks on journalists. And apparently there were dozens of violations committed by the Israeli occupation forces who attacked, arrested, and threatened journalists covering the Palestinian protests. They didn't want it to get out any further than Israel. Wanted it in Israel because Netanyahu needs a distraction from his pending corruption trial. They didn't want to let it out. All right, going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now then, getting on back to Israel. Apparently, Israel launched 2 satellites Tuesday. And they used a European Vega rocket from a spaceport in South America, carrying 2 Israeli-built satellites for the Italian military and a French-Israeli environmental observatory. So, of course, any second we can expect Nikki Haley to run to the UN and scream about Israel, which actually does have nuclear weapons, engaging in the threatening practice of launching satellites into orbit. Any second now we will see Nikki Haley never mind. Now, here's a bizarre story, and the headline is a little misleading. It's out of yahoo.com. Ex-Auschwitz guard healthy enough to be imprisoned. Now, this is a 96-year-old guy known as the bookkeeper of Auschwitz. He's an accountant. And he has been sentenced to 4 years in prison for taking part in whatever was supposed to be taking place back then. And they're saying aiding and abetting, so forth and so on. And he's 96, and his lawyers are saying he shouldn't be going to prison. And the court said, oh, he's healthy enough. We're going to throw him in there. And there's another appeal filed because apparently nobody actually did a medical check on this 96-year-old guy. The court simply said, we declare by fiat that we should lock him up. Now, Israel's got to be in a panic right about now. They're running out of Nazis to wag at us to deflect criticism about what they're doing to the Palestinians. And these last few trials show what's going on. They're persecuting janitors. They went after the guy who fed the dogs. And now they're going after the accountant. When there are no more Nazis for Israel's propaganda machine, what are they going to do? Go after the Nazis' kids? Dig up the dead Nazi bodies and put them on trial all over again? Really has reached a ridiculous level here. Over in Austria, they are making overtures towards Iran for technological cooperation. And they basically want to help each other move forward. Sounds like a really good thing. Another reminder that the rest of the world is actually not going along with these U.S. sanctions here. Now, China is getting very upset over all these THAAD deployments in South Korea. And they're making no secret of how unhappy they are over this. And now they're talking about retaliation against South Korea, Seoul. Down in the Philippines, Duterte has unleashed on Kim Jong-un, saying he's a fool with dangerous toys. Maybe, certainly looks like it. On the other hand, he's one of the few world leaders who is standing up to U.S. bullying, and he is still there. And he's probably remembering that the United States did not actually win the Korean War. It just ground on and on and on and cost lives and money until everybody said, this is a stupid idea. Let's at least have a ceasefire. Now, Patrick Buchanan is out there with some common sense. We've been saying the same thing as well. Saturday, Kim Jong-un tested an ICBM of sufficient range to hit the U.S. mainland. He's now working on its accuracy, and a nuclear warhead small enough to fit atop that missile that can survive re-entry. Now, unless we're going to believe that Kim is a suicidal madman, his goal seems clear. He wants what every nuclear power wants, the ability to strike his enemy's homeland with horrific impact in order to deter that enemy from invading his country. Kim wants his regime recognized and respected. And Kim Jong-un wants the U.S., which carpet-bombed the North between 1950 and 1953, out of Korea. And, of course, the U.S. response seems to be, we have every right to invade anyone we want, anytime we want, and nobody has a right to resist us. Now, I want to talk about that test over the weekend, which was reported as being a failure because it broke up on re-entry. And I'm not really sure, because normally a ballistic missile re-enters the atmosphere at a much shallower angle, at a much slower speed. They just fired this thing straight up and let it come straight back down into the atmosphere. And that is far more stress and thermal energy than the missile would ever be required to survive in actual use. And since it was a dummy warhead, doesn't really matter if it broke up or not. I think from North Korea's point of view, that test was a success. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Lindsey Graham is out there on the warpath saying, Trump told me he will bomb North Korea if it keeps testing missiles. And if millions are going to die, they're going to die over there. Okay, Lindsey, here's your rifle. Here's your parachute. Here's your Dayglow orange jumpsuit left over from the CIA's torture centers. Watch your head climbing into that transport plane, and we're going to call Kim Jong-un and tell him that you are on your way over there to whip his butt. Ron Paul is sounding a warning, same warning we've been sounding all along. It's not beyond the war profiteers causing an accident to start the war with North Korea. Meanwhile, Nikki Haley is up there at the UN pushing for additional sanctions against North Korea. Russia's a holdout because the U.S. proposal does not have clear definitions as to what constitutes an ICBM or mid-range missile. And looking at how the U.S. is straining against the definitions in the P5+1 deal, Russia would like a little bit of clarity. They may still veto it anyway. Now, here's an article, this is out of Pravda, saying that Washington is going to attack North Korea on September 1st. And one warning sign is that the State Department is now banning all American travel to North Korea and has ordered all American passport holders in North Korea to leave before September 1. So they're thinking they're going to do North Korea in September and Iran in October, and we're going to be in World War III for real by Christmas time. Now, China, of course, is being dragged into this North Korean issue by the United States. You know, you must rein in North Korea. And there's an interesting analysis that came out of the Los Angeles Times saying that a grand bargain with China could remove North Korea's nuclear threat, but it would destroy America's global influence. Because everyone would see it was China that dealt with North Korea, not the United States. And this would make it impossible for Washington, D.C. to maintain stability in strategic areas. In other words, the LA Times is saying we should bomb the heck out of North Korea just to prove how butch we are. Don't let Russia do it. Don't let China do it. We have to solve that mess to prove we're still in control of the world, which the U.S. is not. The world is turning away from the U.S. dollar. the world is ignoring these sanctions. I think the rest of the countries on planet Earth are just sick and tired of the behavior of the U.S. government over the last several decades here. Now, do you remember when they opened up the borders and they're bringing in the illegals and the refugees and everything, and the military went on a recruitment drive because young Americans, if they have any other option than joining the military, they are not joining the military. And they are wise and prudent to do so. And I remember at the time saying, none of these refugees or illegals are vetted. We don't know if they're ringers or plants or terrorists. And now apparently the Pentagon, their investigators are going through these recently recruited foreigners and saying, yes, there are security risks. They're not being vetted. They're just trying to shovel these people into the uniforms as fast as they can. And there's another problem with recruiting illegal immigrants for the military with a promise of citizenship. Yeah, they'll sign up. Ooh, I get a green card. I get to be a U.S. citizen. They're not going to be motivated fighters. They weren't born in the United States of America. They don't have an identification with our culture, our history, or our people. Quite the contrary. They want us all to change to be just like where they came from. You put these people on the front lines, they're just going to hide in the foxholes. Now, as you know, Donald Trump has signed the anti-Russia sanctions, and I love the way that this article in Russia Insider put it, enshrining massive geopolitical screw-up into law, and it is. And by the way, there was no formal signing ceremony. You know, when a big piece of legislation goes through, there'll be a ceremony in the Oval Office. There's a whole tray of pens, and the president picks up a pen, writes one letter of his name, and then hands out the pen, picks up another. It's a big deal to have one of those pens. If you're the sponsors of the legislation, you get a presidential pen. Yes, the president signed my law with this pen. They didn't do that. Just brought it in, he signed it, sent it on out there. And what is really very infuriating is these Russia sanctions are all supposedly in response for Russia tampering with the 2016 election, for which there is still zero proof that it happened. It's a fairy tale. This all came out of Hillary Clinton's wounded ego, and they're now basing our national policy toward Russia based on this face-saving, ego-salving hallucination from Hillary. And it is a major mess-up because already you've got Europe talking about retaliatory sanctions against the United States. You have countries openly ignoring the sanctions and saying they don't apply here. Europe went along with the first sanctions and they paid a tremendous price. And they don't want to do that again. Up in Norway, there's a movement to repeal the existing sanctions and certainly to ignore the new ones. And here's where it gets really ironic. According to Standard & Poor's, the new sanctions have had no effect on Russia's sovereign rating. You would think that as soon as the sanctions would sign, there would be some kind of an effect in the global trade. It hasn't happened. Now, Russia's largest oil producer is out there saying these sanctions are going to backfire. They will have negative consequences for the United States. This is from Igor Sechin, Chief Executive Officer of Russia's largest oil producer, Rosneft. Opinion piece coming out of Russia Insider. Washington is going for the jugular. Putin can't afford to be patient anymore. Restraint is no longer an option. Russia must take action. Well, that is absolutely the wrong thing to do, because the U.S. is pushing for a global war on which to blame our crashing economy or try and reignite patriotism in the American people for the government in Washington, D.C., which, by the way, is not going to work. I'll tell you that right now. Putin does have to wait it out the same way that we do, and let this regime complete its self-destruction. By the way, one of the articles we put on whatreallyhappened.com was this very alarming op-ed about how it's time to get rid of that Constitution. It's over 200 years old. I mean, it doesn't support true democracy. It's a republic. We have to get to a true democracy. And it's a very long article about, how all these other countries are changing their constitutions all the time, and we should be doing the same thing too. We're out of the fashion with our allegiance to the Bill of Rights. That should all just go away. And they're calling for a constitutional convention, which, unfortunately, it looks like it's a setup to shred what remains of the Constitution and draw up a new document that enshrines a dictatorship. Because even dictatorships have constitutions. Every country has a constitution, except for Israel. They never wrote one. Another analysis coming out of the Duran saying that the unintended consequences of these new U.S. sanctions will actually work in Russia's short and long-term favor. Remember what happened with the last sanctions. It forced Russia to start becoming more independent and self-sufficient, which is exactly the antithesis of what the New World Order wants. They want a planet divided up into regions, and all the agriculture is over here, and all the electronics is here, and all the automaking is over here, and all the clothes are made over here, in order to force us into dependency on the rest of the planet. And Russia just pulled back from that because of the first sanctions, and this is just going to do more of the same. Russia has all the resources they need inside their border. And by the way, right now, Putin's approval rating in Russia is 83%. Trump's approval rating is now down to, I think the last number I saw was 39%. And yes, I am very disappointed in him. No, I don't regret not supporting Hillary Clinton. She would have been worse. But I'm definitely disappointed in Trump here. Now, Russia has built a bypass gas line in order to start reducing the amount of natural gas transiting through the pipeline through Ukraine, because Ukraine still owes them a bunch of money for natural gas, and Ukraine has apparently been dipping into the gas going to Europe to meet its needs, and Russia is getting ready to shut that valve, and the bypass pipeline will make sure that Europe is still getting their natural gas. Article out of Global Research. Imagine what would happen if China decided to impose economic sanctions on the USA. Now, China is not dependent on products they import from the United States. Quite the contrary. America imports from China. America has a weak industrial and manufacturing base. They're heavily dependent on imports from the People's Republic of China. So if China imposes sanctions, boy, you're going to hear those managers over at Walmart screaming. Those shelves will be empty. It would absolutely disrupt what remains of our consumer economy if that were to happen. And it would be an insane thing to do. But Trump is planning to launch a trade war with China tomorrow. And Beijing is already vowing retaliation, saying we are not going to dance to Trump's tune. Now, there are calmer voices out there trying to calm this trade spat, because China does want to send their products here because they get a lot of money from it. Not as much as they used to. The American consumers been driven down into poverty because by the war machine, by Israel, by the money junkies, and so forth. We don't have a lot of money to buy things here. So if we go to a trade war with China, the stores are going to be empty. Even Amazon will get hit because a lot of the things they sell are made in China. Boy, am I glad that Claire and I just updated our iPhones. They're made in China. The people in Washington, D.C. are certifiably insane. They all got to be on prescription antidepressants, or there's something in the tap water. They're nuts over there. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take a phone call here from Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day to you, Michael. Yeah, first of all, I heard that Benny Netanyahu is going to be indicted for bribery in Israel. I don't know if you heard that yet.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Got the champagne bottle ready to open.
Yeah, so that's, we'll see what happens with that. But, yeah, I was watching the news today, Michael, on one of the news networks. I think it was, can't remember where it was, one of the new networks. And they were talking about Detroit, Michigan, Detroit, the city has half the people that are politicians in that city are convicted felons. Some of them serve 6-10 years in jail. Half of them are running the city of Detroit.
Well, no, actually, the article is there's 8 candidates for mayor on the ballot next week, and 4 of them are convicted felons.
Well, I thought it was. I saw where they talk about the people sit on the commission and all that are felons too.
It could very well be true. It could be, but I hadn't seen that one yet. I mean, of course they're all crooks. Look how they're behaving. You know, we live in a criminal society. And the dumb criminals go to prison, and the smart criminals go to Washington, D.C. or Wall Street.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. Yeah, Michael, but the real reason I did call you, though, is about this Trump's going to go along now with this immigration situation. And I'm saying to myself, I read the 1965 Adjustment Act with that Teddy Kennedy and Manny McQuay or whatever he was at that time. And I'm wondering myself how they allowed that to happen, because they knew dang well this was all for the Democratic Party to pad their voter rolls, and the Republicans went along with that, and they didn't see through that in 1965 that the Democrats' modus operandi was to flood this country with illegal immigration or illegal immigration, and this to literally take the power structure away from the white Caucasians in this country. Look at California, Michael. California's gone. It used to be the 17th world's largest economy in the world, California. Now look at it. It's in bankruptcy. You got a clown Brown out there, insane guy, running the state. I mean, look what's going on in some of these states. I can tell you Florida, they're doing everything in their power to bring all these New Yorkers, all these people that are Democrats into the state that turns to a purple state. It's nothing but a big ploy by a bunch of leftists, communists, Zionists, whatever you want to call them, Zog. They're just trying to turn this country into a communist country. As a matter of fact, Michael, I don't know if you heard about what's going on in Norway right now.
Well, I know about some things going on in Norway. Could you clarify?
Well, now they're talking about in Norway that they're afraid that they don't want to get a fascist party in there, or they don't want to get any kind of right-wing party in there because they're afraid those people will go off the chain if they really find out what the truth is, like what's going on with Sweden, and Denmark. I mean, those people are actually trying to wake up their population. And it's like you talked the other day about Berserker Merkel. She's literally ruined Germany. That place is gone, Michael. It's gone. And Germany is destroyed. And you know what? Those Muslims over there are breeding 5 to 1. So for every woman over there who's a Muslim in Germany who's having a baby, they're having 5. While the average Germany's native there for 1,000 years, they're maybe having 1 child per birthing woman. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, it's called a demographic bomb here. And, of course, Israel's been screaming about that down in Israel because, their Arab population birth rates are much higher than the Israelis. And I think up in one of the European countries, they're trying to balance out that by literally encouraging women, to get pregnant and, basically have sex for the country. And apparently it's working. The birth rates are going up there.
Mike, one more thing. They have a thing in the Miami Herald the other day where every Haitian in Haiti wants to get to South Florida. Cuba's, I think, it's 1 in 3. In Venezuela, I believe it's like half their population. They don't want to come to South Florida, the state of Florida. Can you imagine that? I mean, what is going? It's unbelievable what's happening. And I live in South Florida, Michael, and I can't wait to move out of here. But this place here, you almost got to learn to speak Spanish to stay here. Really, seriously.
Well, the same thing with Los Angeles. When Claire and I finally left Los Angeles, it had reached the point where most of the people you ran into were from Mexico, and you'd say, why aren't you learning English? And they'd come back, why aren't you learning Spanish? There's more of us than there are of you. You do what we want you to do. And again, we're seeing the United States of America literally corroding away, bit by bit, by blurring it with all these other countries. And, of course, that's exactly what George Soros wants.
They're balkanizing it. They're trying to balkanize this place, turn it into Herzegovina, Bosnia-Herzegovina. That's what they're literally, that's their whole game plan.
Tom, got to cut you off here. And, you know, we are trying to limit our calls to a single topic from now on. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And over in Russia today, there's an article. Poland is seriously considering seeking World War II reparations from Germany for the destruction the Nazis brought to Poland during World War II, adding that some 6 million people were slaughtered as a result. There's that number again. They recycled that one a lot here. And they're preparing an analysis if they can legally make the claim. Meanwhile, I'm sure down in Israel, Netanyahu is going to be screaming, saying, no, we're the only ones who get reparations. We're the only ones allowed to use the 6 million number. It's trademark infringement. We're going to sue you. Yet another bank has been caught of laundering millions of dollars for the drug cartels. This is the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. And they've been accused by the Australian Transaction Reports and Analysis Center of 53,700 violations of money laundering and counter-terrorism financing laws, in which the financial institution failed to notify in a timely fashion, usually not at all, transactions topping a mountainous 77 million Australian dollars. Now, as the case unfolds, each breach of the act carries a penalty of 18 million Australian dollars. Meaning, if found guilty and charged to the maximum penalty, Commonwealth Bank could simply vanish from the face of the earth from all the fines. But rest assured, none of those banking executives will ever see the inside of a jail cell, because that's not the way the world works. Bankers are above the law. The corporation, the bank depositors, the bank investors, they'll pay for it all. Story coming out of Zero Hedge, Europe's banking dysfunction worsens. And they're basically talking about how during times when the EU has enjoyed improved economic conditions, rather than inspire long-needed reforms when they have the resiliency and flexibility to do that, they just get complacent. Oh, everything's okay right now. And then when a crisis shows up, then they beat their chest and tear their hair and say, bail out, bail out, bail out, bail out. In other words, they're purely reactive. And that same thing is wrong with the U.S. government as well. And I often call it the firefighter analogy. Your house catches fire, the fire department comes on over, they spray water all over everything, chop holes in the walls, and they give you back about half of what you had before, and they're all heroes. But the guy who 2 weeks before said, I think you ought to tape up that frayed extension cord, he's a pain in the neck. And no politician wants to be a pain in the neck, so they just let things coast along until something really bad happens, and they look for a scapegoat. Oh, Putin did it. Putin came in and threw a bottle of vodka and a match into your home here. We're going to take a phone call. Mike in South Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How y'all doing?
Oh, hey.
Nookie.
What?
Okay, here we go. Two things to pass on to you very quickly. They just hit this week. No doubt you heard about Westinghouse declaring bankruptcy.
Who's declaring bankruptcy? Westinghouse. Okay.
They have under construction 2 nuclear reactors in South Carolina. I believe Thor Daniel, the builder, is building them. They projected $10 billion for the cost of these 2 nuclear reactors. They've exceeded $20 billion, so they're closing them down. That puts out 5,800 workers from their jobs almost overnight.
That's bad.
The other thing I want to pass on to you is that this week, there are foreign workers brought into South Carolina. They have been discovered in Spartanburg, South Carolina, who have they're being delivered at 6:30 in the morning with 15 van loads of workers, construction workers, to BMW plant and also Volvo plant. They found out, and this is under investigation now, it just happened, that those 15 vans are full of Romanian workers.
So basically, we're creating jobs in this country for people from other countries, but not for the American people.
Well, if you're one of the 93 million that are unemployed and not working, then you're not eligible to work. We also here do not take in consideration of your felonies that you have. You can be employed even at BMW if you're a felon. This thing's turned upside down. It's incredible the amount of damage that's being done totally everywhere, and this stuff needs to stop. It just seems like it's interesting how the South Carolina social ferret, Lindsey Graham and Nikki Haley, seem to be doing the same dance together, trying to promote us into a war. Well, I know plenty of people are going to say if we even touch anywhere near a war, there's going to be a lot of congressmen that are going to wish they had another job. So that's what I have for right now. Keep up the good work.
All right, well, thank you for the information. And apparently the Westinghouse bankruptcy happened earlier in the year. The ripple effect into the nuclear industry, that's not a good thing at all. Thank you very much for the phone call here. Getting on back to the economic news here. Well, actually, it's all still economic news here. Apparently, 4 major cities are now sounding the alarm on real estate prices hitting record highs. What's going on here? We know that more millennials are still living with their parents up to the age of 30 while they deal with those student loans. It's not like there's a lot of demand for rental properties or housing properties. What's going on? They're flipping again. They're going back to flipping the houses to run them up in value and create instant equity out of thin air. The same thing that led to the 2008 meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud. And the money junkies learned absolutely nothing from that because they did not have to pay for the destruction. You did. Through TARP and QE and bailout and all the rest of it, the poor American people are always made to pay for every goof and every crime of the money junkies. Isn't life under fascism grand? Now, the corporate media is trying to tamp down on the outrage being expressed by holders of these Obamacare-compliant insurance policies who are seeing double-digit increases in their premiums coming at the start of next year. And they're trying to put the blame on, Donald Trump. Oh, it's his fault. He was going to repeal and replace, and it's all his fault. Well, we know that Obamacare is not Donald Trump's fault. It's Obama's fault. And we know that the premiums have been skyrocketing for the last several years. Every single year, double-digit increases. It's a gouging of the American people for what are really completely useless health insurance policies because of those sky-high deductibles. And it isn't Trump's fault that repeal and replace failed. It was the fault of Republicans in Congress who don't care how Americans get hurt as long as they can push back on Trump's agenda. We're going to show him who's in control. Remember when McCain was overheard saying, let him try and make America great now? John McCain last year was ranting to Democrats about what a disaster Obamacare was. When it came up for a vote for just a clean repeal, McCain voted against it. That was the deciding vote. If McCain had voted the way he was speechifying last year, Obamacare would be gone. Now, over in Europe, it came out that Greece is seriously considering a hard Brexit because of how much they have suffered economically under the European Central Bank. And Jean-Claude Juncker is saying, no, Greece will never leave, Greece will never leave. Juncker is actually claiming that he saved the Eurozone from the debt crisis. The man is delusional. The debt crisis in the Eurozone is getting worse every day. There's been no respite. Apparently, these politicians do not yet understand that in the age of the internet and the independent media, the life expectancy of a government lie can be clocked with an egg timer. Now, Iran's oil exports to China are rising to an 11-month high in August. China wants more of Iran's oil, and Iran is perfectly happy to sell it to them for the yuan, because they can send that yuan back to China and actually get stuff with it. Manufactured goods, agricultural produce. The problem with taking a U.S. dollar anywhere in the world is if you bring it back to the United States, what can you get with it? Overpriced junk, GMO food. It's another reason the world is turning away from us. They don't want our manufactured goods. They don't want our tainted food. General Motors right now is sitting on nearly 1 million new unsold cars sitting in lots all around the country. That's a 50% increase in unsold inventory in just 1 year. And we've all seen the commercials for the car dealerships. The prices are just amazing. If we actually had money, we'd all be buying new cars. But if you take away the American people's jobs and you give them to refugees and illegal immigrants or send them overseas or replace them with automation, you shouldn't be surprised when the American people are no longer able to go to those car dealerships and buy a car, no longer able to go to the shopping malls and buy stuff. And I am absolutely flabbergasted that nobody on Wall Street or Washington, D.C. seems to understand this. They're just buried in their own profiteering. They're not looking up. It's like these zombies walking around with their face in their electronic device, getting run over because they're not watching what the traffic is doing. Now, as you know, one of the issues that Donald Trump addressed coming on in to the White House was the question of a new Air Force One. And actually, there's going to be two of them. There are always two of them. The one the president is in is called Air Force One. And originally, Boeing had this grandiose plan for a specially outfitted 787, I think it was, that was hugely expensive. And apparently that plan is on the outs. The Pentagon, which nominally is in control of the presidential air fleet, they're actually talking about buying some no longer used 747s from Russia to refit as the new Air Force One. In other words, you're not going to see a difference between the one they got now and the one they're getting from Russia. But obviously, you know, the airframes age. And there comes a time where it simply isn't practical or cost effective to just keep on replacing all these parts on a 747. Donald Trump is out there saying he wants access to Britain's food market. That's a big part of his deal for support of Brexit. Of course, the British are kind of cool on that because what is the United States going to sell into Britain's food market? GMO food. Pesticide-contaminated food, adulterated food, chemicals. Trump wants Scotland to forget about independence because that would obviously shrink that British market for GMO food. So let's turn to the refugee crisis here because there's been an interesting development. There are these major non-governmental organizations that have these very large ships tooling around the Mediterranean, and what they claim they're doing is they're rescuing refugees from sinking boats, and they take them to Europe. Oh, how could you question this? We're saving their lives. It's a humanitarian mission. And apparently, some of these NGOs have been caught staging fake rescues. They dump these empty dinghies up and down the coast of Libya. And then they signal to people on the shore to ferry the illegal aliens out to the empty dinghies. And then the large NGO ship just collects them all up, says they're survivors. The process is dangerous. It's highly illegal. And a lot of these refugees and illegal aliens have, in fact, drowned in the process of this hoax. The big question everybody's asking is, if you're just off the coast of the home country, why didn't you take them back home? Why do you cross the entire Mediterranean to drop them into Europe? It's a scam. Soros is still trying to blur the world together for his New World Order, One World government. Apparently, up in Sweden, an Arab Christian pastor has gone public saying that the Swedish refugee centers now fly the flag of ISIS, and these Swedish refugee centers have been turned into recruitment centers, radicalizing the newly arrived migrants. Now, here's a story. When I lived in New Hampshire as a kid, we always loved going up to Canada. It's beautiful up there. When Claire and I were living in Washington State, same thing. We'd drive up the road, go to Vancouver. Stock up on cheap over-the-counter medications. Wonderful anthropology museum. Wonderful people. Very clean up there, very polite. But that was a long time ago. Canada just seems to have gone over the edge here. This is a story that is coming on out from Canada right now. Apparently there was a gentleman, Kyle Earl Munro, was in his home with a friend when 3 armed intruders entered his home. And he and his guest struggled with the intruders, and Munro managed to take a gun away from one of the intruders. He shot one of the intruders, non-fatal wound. And the Canadian government has now charged this homeowner who defended his home with attempted murder, intent to discharge a firearm when being reckless, careless use of a firearm, improper storage of a firearm. It wasn't even his. Pointing a firearm, possession of a weapon for a dangerous purpose, unauthorized possession of a firearm, possession of a firearm knowing the possession is unauthorized, and possession for the purpose of trafficking. None of these things are true. He disarmed a home invader, and the Canadian government wants to tell you you're not allowed to protect your own homes anymore. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And over on the Corbin Media, I was looking at the Fox News feed, and they were talking about the new sanctions, and the banner at the bottom said, White House slaps new sanctions on Russia, Iran, and North Korea. That is flat out wrong. Congress slapped those sanctions on with a veto-proof majority. Trump was left with no choice in the matter whatsoever, and he's made it very clear he does not think this is a good idea. And it's very dishonest for the corporate media to try and make it look like this decision came from the White House. It most assuredly did not. Now, as you know, Attorney General Sessions is on the warpath against legalizing marijuana, and he's trying to find ways to literally get around the state laws in states that have legalized it. And he's going against the popular opinion. The latest survey is showing 86% of Americans support legalizing marijuana. That's what the public wants. Now, as you know, over in Nevada, they legalized recreational cannabis for retail sale. Nevada, wild place, Las Vegas, all the rest of that stuff. And that's fine. You know, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Unfortunately, all of the dispensaries are looking at massive shortages. They can't get product in. And apparently the problem is not that there is a shortage of marijuana. There's apparently a huge supply. For some reason, the alcohol distributors are the ones distributing the marijuana, the dispensaries, and they're just slowing it down because their big money comes from big alcohol. And so they're literally impeded. They're trying to create these shortages and impede it because they don't want people to realize marijuana is actually far less harmful than alcohol. They're already seeing a drop in alcohol sales in states where marijuana has been legalized. And they want to guard their profits, even if that means sabotaging what is now a legal business inside Nevada. Now, the other day I was talking about Calexit, and I thought this was a revival of the attempt to break California into two pieces. And as it turns out, this is actually a movement for California to secede from the Union completely. And people are asking what would really happen. And there are a lot of people supporting the Calexit movement. There are people living in California who think their state would be better off without being hitched to the rest of the Union, especially Washington, D.C., and I sympathize with that point of view. And then, of course, you have the people living in every other state who can't wait to get rid of California. If for no other reason, then you can put up a border wall around California. Try and get that immigration thing under control. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Getting on back to the issue of police mess-ups here. And I got to tell you, this thing out of Canada. And we've seen similar cases here in the United States. Somebody defending their home from an armed criminal, and they're the ones who wind up in legal trouble. I remember one case, this happened, I think, back in the 1990s, where this armed intruder broke into a home, got into a conflict with the homeowner. Homeowner shot him in the foot, and the criminal, the home invader, literally sued the homeowner for ending his chosen career, making it impossible for him to follow his chosen career. And he probably didn't come up with that himself. Probably some lawyer desperate for a fee can say, yeah, we'll just take away his home and I'll get 1/3 and you'll get 2/3. You know the old saying, one lawyer in a town is going to starve, 2 lawyers in a town are going to prosper. So we're getting on back to this story, and this actually happened back in April, where there was this family that was doing a hydroponic project, school project with their kids, and they'd gone to the local garden shop and they'd bought some things to do some indoor planting. And apparently the shop was being surveilled by a police officer, and he noted down the family. And apparently the police department was looking to build some publicity that they were scoring victories on the war on drugs. So they basically went down to the family's trash and they pulled out these wet leaves. And they did a field test that tested positive for marijuana. And they did a SWAT team raid, searched the house for 3 hours and found nothing. And the warrant specified marijuana, but after finding no plants, the police just broadened the search to look for any kind of criminal activity. The wet leaves turned out to be tea. And the packaging on that field test clearly says, verify a positive with a lab test. And by the way, the police didn't even video the field test to show the chain of evidence. They just said, yeah, we did a field test, it was positive. They never verified with the lab. And police officials were furious that their publicity stunt had backfired. They're more concerned about their public image than actually doing the job. And if you will remember, what happened at Waco, Texas, began as a BATF publicity stunt that went horribly, horribly wrong. And the only way they could deal with it was to just kill everybody, bulldoze the place, and say, oh yeah, it was a mass suicide, really, honest. Trust us, we're the government, we would never lie to you. It's amazing here. This is getting bizarre. Over in Nebraska, female recruits for the Nebraska State Patrol have filed a lawsuit saying that they were told they would have to undergo exams that were medically unnecessary and sexually invasive before being hired, which tells you what was going on. And so this one state trooper, Brienne Splitgerber, she's 37 years old, filed a civil rights lawsuit against the Nebraska State Patrol, the state of Nebraska, 2 former patrol heads, and various other people, accusing them of permitting and covering up the sexual assault of female candidates. I can't even imagine what justification they had saying that a vaginal examination has some impact on your ability to do the job. But that's what they were putting them through. Are they all on prescription antidepressants? Are we literally drugging our entire society into insanity with these chemicals? Okay, now, a lot of people are concerned about smart meters. They're concerned about yet another radiating device near them. I'm not as concerned about that. But there is a concern in that there have been a lot of fires associated with the installation of these smart meters, as well as people reporting that for some strange reason, their electric bill goes up after they get the smart meter in there. But apparently, BBC came out with a story saying that the house fires may not be a defect in the smart meters themselves. Basically, their investigation showed that the installers of these smart meters are not properly trained and they don't know what they're doing. And of course, you're dealing with wires carrying the entire household current. You make a mistake, it's going to start a fire. And these companies are cutting costs. Yeah, we don't need to pay for training. They can read an instruction book, RTFM, and that'll solve the whole problem. Okay, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, social justice warrior Ben Jankowicz has decided the Maryland flag is racist. We have to get rid of that flag. It's racist. He's saying that the Maryland flag, obviously, it's ridiculous. He's saying there are Confederate symbols hidden in it. If you squint real hard, you'll see the Confederacy there. Actually, the Maryland flag is made from the family crests of 2 families who founded that area, the Calvert and the Crossland families. It's a black and gold and red and white design. That's it. Oh, it's got white in there. That's the racist part. I mean, some of these social justice warriors, you wonder what's going on in their mind. Are they on hallucinogens or something? They're seeing stuff that isn't there. All right, let's talk about computers and computer security right now. Apparently it has turned out that Tesla's Model 3 cars have secret cameras installed in the rear view mirror that can watch the driver. Tesla insists they are not activated. They're just there for some possible future use. All right. You remember the Sony hack? A while back, got a lot of inside information out of Sony. It was blamed on North Korea, and then it turned out to be an internal leak. There's been another major breach. This one is over at HBO. It's 7 times larger than the Sony breach, and they got a lot of stuff. They got personal details of a top executive. They got information about future episodes of Game of Thrones, including full episodes, unreleased episodes of Ballers, Room 104, and Insecure. They're producing a show called Barry. It's not supposed to hit the screens until next year. 2 of those episodes were taken. Yeah, they're going to blame North Korea for it, or they're going to blame Russia for it. It's amazing. WikiLeaks is out there continuing to expose the dark secrets of the CIA. The latest one is called Dumbo, and this is a CIA tool that allows them to take remote control of your webcam and turn it on, turn it off whenever they want. I remember when webcams first came on out, they always had these little privacy shields that you could just flip down. Funny how no webcams have that anymore. No little shutter. Don't want you shutting off that lens in case the CIA needs to look at you or your children in the privacy of their room. Bunch of perverts over there at the CIA here. Another tool that they have, and this one is called, actually it's a continuation of the Dumbo project, because apparently this device not only works with webcams, it basically can be used to shut down security cameras. Like you see in the movies where all of a sudden the security cameras turn off and bad things happen. Well, the CIA actually developed that. And apparently, once it's installed, the Dumbo program allows the CIA to mute all your microphones, disable all network adapters, suspend any process using a camera recording device, or selectively corrupt or delete recordings. Want to make sure that you don't have any incriminating evidence about anybody here. Now, if you're using the Chrome browser and if you're using the web developer for Chrome extension, which is a handy little tool, that plugin has now been hacked. And apparently, cyber criminals broke into the Google account of the author of this extension, Chris Pederick, and they updated the software to version 0.4.9 and pushed it out to 1,044,000 users. And this booby-trapped extension fetched JavaScript code from the web and ran it in the people's browser. The code forcibly slapped ads on pages, and it may have done worse. So if you install that 0.4.9 of Web Developer for Chrome extension, you have to upgrade to the clean version 0.5 replacement and start changing your passwords or nullifying logins and cookies. Now, here's a very interesting story. You probably remember Marcus Hutchins. This was the guy who, by accident, discovered how to disable the WannaCry malware. And he was apparently in Las Vegas at the Black Hat and DevCon conferences, where everybody gets together and figures out new ways to make your life miserable on your computer, as if Microsoft was not already doing a good job on that. And apparently, when he was on his way to the airport to return home to Britain, he was arrested by the Nevada police. And there was a little bit of confusion because people who wanted to look after him went over to the police station and all trace of him had vanished. And there were articles out there saying, we don't know what's happened to him, where is him? Well, here's the story. Apparently, he was arrested on behalf and by the FBI. And apparently he is being charged with 6 counts of helping to create, spread, and maintain the banking Trojan Kronos between 2014 and 2015. So apparently he wasn't such a good guy after all, and his skill at stopping WannaCry is now understood. So let's talk about ClimateGate. There's all kinds of things out there. We just put up a video from the Corbett Report, Orwell's Nightmare, Temperature Adjustments and Climate Change, where they go into this recent scandal where once again the official temperature records are all being rewritten. And the reference to Orwell, of course, is that Winston Smith's job in Orwell's 1984 is to constantly change the past record so that the present government is not embarrassed by it. That's his job. And we're literally seeing that happen here. We've been saying it's warming. We can't be embarrassed by the fact that it's cooling. Give me warming data. And that's exactly what happened. And some of the latest claims are just hysterical. Story out of the Daily Mail. Just going outdoors could become deadly in South Asia by the end of the century. Climate change study warns. And scraping at the bottom of the barrel here, this story came out of Matrix Bob. Global warming aficionados, the carbonazis, the gorophiles, whatever you want to call it, are now saying pets are responsible for 20% of human-caused global warming, and you should get rid of your dogs and cats right now. I don't think so. And to tell you how poorly thought out these things are, there was an article out earlier today where the global warming cultists say we need to block the sun's rays. If we block the sun's rays, the warming will stop and everything will be fine. Okay. Now, what is a natural sink for carbon dioxide here on Earth? Plant life. Photosynthesis. Turns into oxygen, absorbs the carbon dioxide. What happens if you block the sun's rays? The plants die. They don't photosynthesize. Carbon dioxide starts to increase. They don't think the stuff through. It just sounds really good on the news. And the fact is, we're not warming, we're cooling. And it's far cooler than it was in 1936. They don't want you to know about that. They're just out there, push the agenda, catapult the propaganda, move forward, sell product. We were talking yesterday about how there are these massive demonstrations in Italy against forced mandatory vaccines, and it's not being reported by the American corporate media because they don't want you to get bad ideas, uppity ideas that, you can stand up to the vaccine makers and say, I don't want your products. The more vaccines we get, the poorer the health of our children becomes. And by the way, there was a study that showed that. Countries with the most mandatory vaccines, the children had poorer health, higher rates of autism and various other neurological disorders. Countries where there were no mandatory vaccines, the children are healthy. Article out of Global Research up in Canada. Vaccines, just get your darn shots here. And apparently that is literally what's coming out of these uninformed TV physicians, paid trolls, and paid celebrities. Just get the shots. Don't give me any argument. And you have all these parents, siblings, and neighbors who know that the vaccines are harmful. They watched it happen with their own eyes. But the medical industrial complex is not about keeping you healthy. In fact, the sicker you are, the more money they expect to make off of you. The other day we were talking about the Insider, Russell Crowe movie, about how the tobacco companies knew they were selling an addictive product and covered it up. We were talking about these pharmaceutical CEOs that were incentivizing doctors to overprescribe prescription opiates to get the patients hooked, get more money out of them. That's how predatory our corporate culture has become. And this rebellion is starting to spread. Growing numbers of pet owners are refusing to vaccinate their pets. The public is aware. There's a problem. These are not safe products. They're not effective products. It's just product for the sake of a fast buck. Maybe we ought to rename these practitioners. Instead of DR in front of their name, we put AFAB, anything for a buck. Now, over at Natural News, they have another article about this molecule called nagalase. And it is found in vaccines. Laboratory tests of the most popular vaccines have confirmed this molecule is in there. And there is no therapeutic purpose for it to be there. What nagalase does is it interferes with your body's ability to fight cancer. Now, you think about that one for a while, and maybe that's why there's this aggressive vaccine push. We need to give everybody cancer so we can sell them chemotherapy and radiation. Money, 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 money. Anything for a buck. And we are seeing cancer rates go up in this country. Spending on cancer drugs is increasing 6.5% annually over the past 5 years. And is predicted to increase by 8% starting next year. Would they deliberately make you sick to make a fast buck? Why wouldn't they? There's no money in treating sick people or dying people. The big money is taking healthy people and making them dependent on our products. We'll be back after these few words. Oh, they've got Al Gore on Fox now, interview the carbon pollution, the global warming. He's trying to salvage his inconvenient sequel, which is not generating an overwhelming amount of box office interest right now. We're just now getting word over in Dubai, there is a residential a tower in the Dubai Marina. They had a fire back in 2015. They've got another one. It's called the Torch Tower. Very appropriate name. It's the 5th largest residential building in the world, and images posted to social media are showing several floors fully engulfed. And I certainly hope everybody gets out of there safe and they're able to deal with it. But looking at that, I'm just thinking, any second that building is going to collapse right into its own footprint, just like World Trade Center 7. Any second. Any second now, it's just going to come right on down to its own footprint. Going to fall. I'll forget it. One of the reasons other countries don't want our food products is they are contaminated with all kinds of nasty stuff. Some of it is pure adulteration of the food. Some of it is just sloppy handling and preparation of the product here. But apparently, tests, according to this Natural News again, dozens of popular brands of U.S. hot dogs, bacon, sausage, lunch meat, sandwich, ham, cured meats, carry a corrosion-resistant chemical known as sodium nitrite. Now, sodium nitrite, just by itself, is a known cancer-causing chemical. In fact, it was actually being developed by the USDA as a deadly bait to poison wild hogs, so that you will go and buy your pork from the supermarket. At least here in Hawaii, we're allowed to hunt the wild pigs. Bow and arrow only here. Scientific research shows sodium nitrite increases the risk of pancreatic cancer by 67%. And when sodium nitrite combines with the hydrochloric acid in your stomach and the amino acids found in meat, you get nitrosamines, which are also cancer-causing chemicals. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Andy in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha snack bar, my friend.
Aloha snack bar.
Hey, are you just had enough of this? I mean, how do you do this? How do you just keep going day after day after day, reporting this garbage?
Vodka.
What they're doing to us. I mean, how do you do this?
Vodka.
Mike?
Lots of vodka.
How do you do it?
Lots of vodka. It's the only way I get through.
Lots of vodka? What happens when that Russian connection is cut off?
Oh, I'm going to have to go to the Moonshiners then.
There you go.
Yeah.
No, I mean, in all honesty, I mean, here we go. I mean, everything we do, I mean, even your vodka has probably got some genetically modified particle in it.
It probably does. Where do you know, maybe I should set up my own still, and make my own, but then the corn will be GMO and I'll be stuck with all that nonsense here.
Exactly.
Alrighty.
That's right. Man, I'm at wit's end, Mike. I'm totally at wit's end. I got an idea. Okay. Since I live here in Hawaii, I'm going to work on a new project of genetically recombining our local marijuana with the California redwood, and it's going to revolutionize the patio furniture industry. There you go. I mean, this is just too much. I mean, I love listening to everything you have to say, but I mean, it's just too much. These guys are getting us from every
It is
angle,
overwhelming.
right?
It is overwhelming, and I'm trying to bring more humor back into the presentation here, because it is very overwhelming. And frankly, like I said before, living here on Oahu, a lot of people are very concerned that we're going to get caught up in this next world war, because after all, they started the last one just right out that window.
Well, nobody on this planet likes anybody. What happened to we're all a team, we're all on this big blue marble together? I mean, we all bleed the same blood. I mean, you know, we have different types and whatnot, but we're all on this big blue marble together.
Ordinary people can get along just fine. It is the leaders, and we got to stop listening to them. All right, Andy, I got to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, probably most of you will remember the movie Erin Brockovich, which is actually based on a true story about this woman who got involved with a class action lawsuit on behalf of the citizens of Hinckley, California, who were made quite ill by a chemical called hexavalent chromium, which was being used as a corrosion inhibitor in the pipes of Pacific Gas and Electric. And they would dump the used hexavalent chromium into these storage pools, which were leaking. And there was this huge plume of this chemical drifting through the town, contaminating all their water, and they had all these horrible health problems. And people told everybody, well, it's actually quadrivalent chromium, which is perfectly safe and healthy for you. They lied to them. And it was a big lawsuit, and it led to a gigantic cash settlement. And it's a very interesting story about how the corporate mind really thinks. Who cares if we make these people sick? We just got to do it in a cost-effective fashion. And that cost-effective has reared its head again. And you would think after what happened in Flint, Michigan, where they made all these people sick to try and save just a few bucks on the budget, they would have learned a lesson. But apparently, not too long ago, out in California, the State Water Resources Control Board set the maximum contaminant level for hexavalent chromium to 10 parts per million. I love the way the government will say, we have decided that you can be exposed to this much and nothing bad will happen. I seriously doubt that. And it raised a huge stink where apparently for economic reasons, because it was costing too much to remove the hexavalent chromium from the drinking water, they wanted the level set to 50 parts per million. And it went to court, and the court apparently ruled in favor of the lawsuit, and the water board isn't going to appeal. So now there's going to be 5 times as much hexavalent chromium in the drinking water in that part of California than there was before. Who cares if we're making you sick? Yeah, it'll build business for the medical industrial complex. You know, make sure you've got your Obamacare compliant insurance policies, and all will be well. To nobody's surprise, organic food sales continue to break records as shoppers shun the deadly counterparts. And unfortunately, as is usually the case, when there is a sharp market trend like that, there are going to be fraudsters and hoaxers coming on in. So you have to be just as careful with the labels on your organic natural food as you do with anything else you get at the supermarket. Apparently there is a big stink over this Ensure, the drink that is supposed to meet all your nutritional needs, and it's touted as safe and healthy. And an analysis has showed it's got the same crummy chemicals in it that pretty much any other processed food has as well. The other day, somebody put out this rather amazing animation of earthquakes in Oklahoma between 2004 and 2016. And the video runs and runs, and there's a pop over here, and there's a pop over here, and there's a pop over here, and then all of a sudden they start to speed up. And by the time it gets to 2016, it's like a machine gun. And the United States Geological Survey has finally conceded that fracking causes earthquakes. And again, we already knew that. Injection wells are going to cause earthquakes because it happened out in Southern California at the 29 Palms Marine Base. Because they got it into their heads they were going to get rid of some unsalvageable wastewater by pumping it down this convenient earthquake fault. And all of a sudden they started getting dozens and dozens of these small, harmless quakes. But still, it was very worrying. And what's going on is you're pumping this liquid into this gigantic fault system, and it's like the pedal on the bottom of your barbershop or beauty salon chair, where with one toe they can lift your weight. It's hydraulics. or the hydraulic jack that picks up your car at the garage. It pushed the walls of the fault system apart, which allowed them to slip. And they stopped pumping the wastewater into the fault at 29 Palms, and the quakes went away. So it was already known this was going to be an issue. And yet, they allowed the fracking to take on off because it makes money. And in the United States of money, anything that makes money is good. And anything that gets in the way of making money is obviously very, very bad here. Another story coming out of Natural News. And again, it shows you just how corrupt the whole system is. This story originally appeared on GM Watch and was published just earlier this week. And it came out at the same time that the New York Times published a story revealing Forbes to be a propaganda outlet for Monsanto. So basically, documents released in U.S. cancer litigation showed that Monsanto, in a desperate attempt to suppress a study that showed adverse effect of Roundup, made an arrangement with the editor of the journal that retracted the study. They were paying him $400 per hour to kill that ad. Now remember that study that came out in France where they took these rats and they allowed them to live their entire lifespan, and they were in 3 groups. There was a control group that was fed natural corn. The second group was fed GM corn, Roundup Ready corn, and the third group Roundup Ready corn and glyphosate. And the Roundup rats started developing these massive tumors at 4 months. Now, Monsanto ended their rat trials at 3 months to declare Roundup to be safe. And these French scientists, they were doing all the biopsies, and it was published. And then Monsanto got one of their people onto the editorial staff of the journal that had published the study, and it was retracted. And this is how they maintain their right, if you will, to sell dangerous products. And what Monsanto is trying to do, I think, they want to monopolize all food production on Earth. They want everybody locked into the Monsanto GMO seeds. They want all the natural heritage varieties to be driven into extinction. Monsanto is probably very, very happy that the bees, the pollinizers, are dying off. And it's basically what the Federal Reserve was trying to do with the global economy with the Federal Reserve note, Monsanto is trying to do to the global food production network with their Roundup Ready seeds. Establish a trade monopoly. Make the world dependent on Monsanto. And dependency is slavery. Now, here's a good development. Russia and China are getting ready to sign a cooperation deal on further exploration of the moon. Looks like they're going to be heading on back there. A lot of people don't remember this, but when we started getting into the space race, John F. Kennedy wanted to abandon the race to the moon with the Russians because it was so expensive. And he actually floated the idea, let's just go together. We'll provide half. The Soviets will provide half. We'll get to the moon and come on back. It'll be a grand adventure. And, of course, that idea was never implemented. So Russia and China are going to sign this cooperation deal to explore the moon, and good for them. It's time for us to stop fighting amongst each other and start looking outward into that universe to see just who the heck is out there. Now, getting on back to religion, and again, I have to wonder what's going on here. Is it prescription antidepressants? I really don't understand what's going on. But apparently, down in the Philippines, there's this Catholic priest was caught driving a 13-year-old girl to a motel. And he'd gotten the girl from a 16-year-old pimp. And the police were tracking him because he'd been accused by other students at this school that he was the head of. He's now obviously stepped down on that situation. But apparently one of the people that he abused told the parents told the police they were watching this guy, and they caught him. And here's another one. They're over in Italy. There's this priest, Mauro Inzoli, and they're trying to make this go away. Pope Francis has offered him early retirement. We're not going to call the cops. We're not going to send you off to the happy home for happy priests. But basically says you can have early retirement to seek a life of prayer and humble discretion. He's been found guilty of sexual abuse of minors. He was arrested. And according to one of his victims, what this priest told these kids he was doing was a baptism of the testicles, and said it's a sign of affection between father and son. It's an old Jewish ritual. It's amazing. It's amazing. Okay, apparently over in North Carolina, there's been a chemical leak at a swimming pool that has sent a whole bunch of children to the hospital. And they're not saying, apparently, sodium hypochlorite. There was a leak, and it's commonly used to disinfect the pool, and they all got exposed, overdose to that. Okay, let's see. I love this one. Intel's upcoming Coffee Lake CPUs won't work with today's motherboards. Apparently, they put a lot of money into developing this new processor, but apparently it is not going to work with the current generation of motherboards. There's some good planning for you there. There is some good planning out there. Now, a while back, we were talking about these projects to edit the DNA of a baby while it's still a fertilized egg using the CRISPR system. And I expressed my concern that this was a very, very dangerous technology, and there ought to be some controls. And apparently a lot of other people are saying exactly the same thing. Over in the Daily Mail, they're saying that there is a backlash now on this idea of designer babies, because all of the world's money junkies are out there saying, oh, yes, I want a child that's designed to my specifications. And scientists are saying this has to be confined to the laboratory. We don't dare let it out into the wild. And maybe some of these people are paying attention to some of the problems that we've already seen, where genetically modified organisms are breaking into the wild. The DNA is hybridizing with other plants. Above the Arctic Circle, somebody actually had the foresight to set up a storage vault of heritage seeds that have not been touched by genetic engineering. And they were going all over the world trying to find these natural varieties. And they went down to the mountains of Mexico, way into the interior, to find wild maize, the original native corn plant of the Americas. And they got it back to the lab and they tested it, and they found out it was carrying marker genes from GMO corn, meaning the pollen had reached this corn and been incorporated into it. I'm still very concerned about the epicite gene breaking into the wild, especially as we're hearing all these articles about the decline in quality of sperm in the West. So they're sounding a warning, saying that, yeah, there's a lot of potential for good, but as we've seen with so many other technologies, the potential for misuse has to be taken into account. Computers are very useful, wonderful things, but look how much pain, suffering, and misery we're all dealing with from all the cyber criminals, which includes the governments spying on us all. We've been talking about the Gulf of Mexico. We've been talking about it in the context of, is there really enough safe, healthy food to feed the current human population? And after the Deepwater Horizon disaster, and after Fukushima, and after all these other things, I'm afraid the answer actually is no. And that may be the reason why the government is tolerating all of these disastrous chemicals in food. They don't know any other way to feed us. We're getting into Soylent Brown, Soylent Red, and eventually Soylent Green. And apparently scientists have discovered the largest ever dead zone. It's the size of New Jersey in the Gulf of Mexico. And it's the largest measured dead zone since mapping began there in 1985. Now, they're saying it's a dead zone because there's no oxygen in the water. Now, there's oxygen in the water in the Gulf of Mexico in other areas, just not here. And this validates something I've been saying for quite some time. Every time there's a massive fish die-off and they say, oh, well, there was no oxygen in the water, they stop there and they don't explain what's going on. It's the methane that is leaking out of these fracking wells or wells in the Gulf of Mexico that leak, because when methane is bubbling through water, it will decompose. And it will result in the formation of carbon dioxide, which continues to bubble up to the surface, and more water molecules. And a water molecule is a water molecule is a water molecule. The problem is it is absorbing free oxygen from the water in this reaction. And that's why all over the U.S., especially in Oklahoma, we're getting all these stories about these ponds and rivers and streams that have always had fish in them, and all of a sudden they're dead. They're absolutely dead. And now we're hearing about dead zones the size of the state of New Jersey in the Gulf of Mexico, which means there is going to be no food coming out of these areas. So it is alarming, to say the least, how reckless all of this has been. All in the name of profitability. Now, in a normal, healthy society, the government's job is to maintain the overview, to strike a balance behind economic growth for the corporations and what is best for the general population. When you're living under fascism, the government goes over to the side of big business. It's an alignment of government authority and corporate greed against the general population. And we are there. This U.S. Inc. is totally unconcerned with our health or safety. It's totally obsessed with making more money for the money junkies. Benito Mussolini once said that fascism really ought to be called corporatism, because it is that alignment of corporate greed and government power against the general population. We're going to take a break for commercials. Back with our last segment after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before I go back to the phones here, this story coming on out, courtesy of the Still Report. Do you remember Guccifer 2.0? There was an original Guccifer, Romanian hacker, came and went. He was the one who basically said that it was very easy to break into Hillary Clinton's email server, that he had seen at least 10 other foreign IPs logged into Hillary's server at the same time he was prowling around. Then he kind of went away. Then we had Guccifer 2.0. And according to information that's coming on out in this Still Report, Guccifer 2.0 was an Obama technical support guy. And the idea that there was a Guccifer 2.0 was a fiction created by the Democratic National Committee and Obama insiders to try and steer interest away from why Seth Rich was killed and try and pin the exposure of the DNC emails on Russia and Trump. Now, IT experts have already pointed out the metadata on the leaked DNC emails proves that it could not have been taken over the internet. The download speed was simply too great. The metadata also shows that the data originated in the eastern United States time zone, not in Moscow. And apparently there's a YouTuber, Devin, has put together a video that says there was a Microsoft Word document that was used for much of the information on the disk, and it was registered to a DNC staffer named Warren Flood. So that appears to be the individual who was posing as Guccifer 2.0 to try and frame the Russians for the DNC email leak. All right, we're going to take one more phone call. Mike in South Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Mike, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Okay.
I just didn't hear that click in. Here's something added to your Gulf report, the Gulf oil, and that is that those fractures that happened 5 years ago have never stopped. There are 5 of them down there. One of them is a half a mile long. The propane you talked about, the methane coming out is true, but those oil is spilling out of there still to this day. It's never been stopped. Currently, the local news we're getting here in town is that the oil companies are putting out surveys that are saying that microorganisms are going down to the bottom of the ocean, which is about a mile down, and they're eating up and cleaning up all that oil down there, which is a complete total lie. I was on the radio with them the other 2 days ago, and it said that that's a flat-out lie survey. I would believe that if my life depended on it, and then I was immediately shoved right off the air. So it's all a lie, and it's just some major damage in the Gulf of Mexico, and don't know where it's going, but I wouldn't eat anything out of there. I guarantee you that.
Oh, okay, that would be dangerous here. I read an article not too long ago that the genetically designed bacteria that are supposed to eat oil are eating other things as well, including fish that would otherwise be available to the human population. I'm just concerned that if those cracks at the bottom down by the Deepwater Horizon, if they continue to extend, that pressure dome, that oil dome underneath there is under extremely high pressure. If that were to let go all at once, we would have a release of methane that really would cause some serious environmental damage. There's the music. Thank you for the call. Gotta go, Mike. Gotta go, Mike. I'm sorry. We ran out of time here. There's the music. Please stay tuned to John Stadmiller's program. Take what you learn here. Share it with everyone that you know. We'll be back tomorrow on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Aloha, America.